Hi folks, I hope you're still ready to build that amazing game. My name's David Chadwick. I'm the founder here at Tactics Studios, and I hope you've been enjoying this introductory series on the use of the default game engine. You know, as I look at the design and the development of games, as they become a little bit more complex, you always want a game that's got multiple levels, multiple game worlds, based on either achievement or you want to increase the difficulty or things such as that. That's going to be the focus of this tutorial. We're going to focus on the concept of a game level, a collection, and how you apply collections in building those individual game worlds so that you can move all of your game objects and images in and out of memory to conserve memory space on mobile devices, for example. The second thing we're going to focus on in this tutorial is we're going to focus on what's called a Lua module. You know, you're writing a lot of script and you write a lot of functions that you want to share amongst multiple components in your game, and you don't want to have to repeat it each time. The Lua module allows you to do that. So I'm going to shorten up this introduction. Hey, let's stand by. This is our last tutorial. Welcome aboard. Here we are. We're at the last tutorial in this introductory series. Quite an accomplishment. In this particular tutorial, we're going to focus on levels and modules. And here's a quick example of what we mean by that. Let me show you real quick. As you can see, we have a menu. We can click something on the menu. It'll move us into another level. From that level, we can exit, come back to the menu and go to a different level, and then exit back to the menu. Pretty typical. You see a lot of games that focus that same general template. Okay, let's share here on the whiteboard a little bit of exactly what we're going to focus on in this tutorial. I've already said we're going to talk about multiple collections, and that's really the key focus of this tutorial. And importantly, how you use a collection proxy. That's the tool inside Defold that allows you to pass messages from one collection to another collection, to load that other collection perhaps into memory and take it out of memory, and so that you're conserving memory dynamically using your script. The second major thing we're going to talk about is the concept of a Lua module. A Lua module allows you to put in a series of functions or variables and then invoke them across multiple scripts across your entire game. That's pretty useful in terms of the reuse of your code. Lastly, instead of a single graphic user interface, we're going to have multiple graphic user interfaces. We're going to have one for each of the levels, each of those game collections, and we'll talk a little bit about how they can interact. So let's not talk anymore. Let's get down into it. I know you want to start building the game, but before we do, there's a couple design elements that I think are pretty important that we understand. So there's going to go through a sequence here. We're going to go first through the high-level architecture. How does this overall product look? You know, a lot of people talk about game patterns, but you don't see many people discussing them. They kind of get down into code immediately. So we're going to talk a little bit about the pattern that I think applies for this type of game. The second thing we're going to do is then take the next step down and get into the design structure. We're going to look at how the components all fit together within that high-level architecture. Then we're going to take a look at the GUI nodes. We have multiple GUIs. We're going to take a look at the designation that's used for each of those nodes so that as you look at the overall programs, you look at the scripts and you look at the detailed default collections, you kind of see how they all place. Then we're going to do a couple syntax deep dives. There's a couple new techniques that we're going to build into this particular game. I want you to understand those before we jump in and start building the game. And then we'll get into the actual build plan and build it across a total of 5 distinct builds. Well, as we learned in a previous tutorial, the Defold engine organizes all your game objects into collections. For larger games, the size of all the game objects and the images may be too large to load into memory all at once. So that's the primary reason, or one of the key reasons, that you want to be able to control that load and unload process. And the collection proxy feature at Defold is going to allow you to split your content into multiple separate collections. And the collection proxy is the component that can send messages that directs that loading and enabling and disabling of a collection. When the script issues a load command to the proxy, it loads into memory the designated collection. And when the script issues an unload command to the proxy, it unloads all the objects and all the components within that designated collection from memory. Load level 1. That loads level 1, all the components of level 1 into memory. Enable level 1. That initiates the execution. And finally, unload level 1 removes all the components of level 1 from memory. Now onto our architecture. For this project, we're going to build 3 distinct default collections. The main collection, a level 1 collection, and a level 2 collection. The main collection will be what controls the overall menu that guides the game. Level 1 will be a particular game world, if you will, that's got a wizard that can move back and forth. And level 2 is a different game world in which there's a monkey that can be moved around the screen. Since for larger games, and we're using this as a template for that, the size of all the game objects and the images may be too large to hold in memory at once within a particular game world. So we want to be able to control what collections are being held in memory and which ones aren't at any point in time. So we're going to include these 2 collection proxies as the components that we'll be sending messages to that will direct the loading or the unloading and the enabling of either the level 1 or the level 2 collections. It's optional, but I retain the main collection in memory all the time. It's pretty small in size, and since the overall game controller is contained within that collection as a script file, I like to have it available basically all the time. Okay, in this design structure overview, we're going to take each of the collections and we're going to take a look at each of the components that are within those collections, each of the game objects and subordinate components within those game objects. And then we're also going to take a look at the GUI, look at the nature of the graphics, the layers, the fonts, and the nodes associated with each of those GUIs. And from that, you'll get a general sense of how this entire game is structured. When Defold starts up, it will load and initiate the top level collection. Here's the structure of that main.collection. It consists of a single game object, main, which contains the main.script that's used to control the overall load and unload processes, as well as a main menu GUI. You'll also notice that it contains the 2 level proxies, level 1 proxy and level 2 proxy. If we expand the main menu GUI, you'll see that there are GUI nodes for each of the 2 selection buttons, as well as a node for the menu panel. A set of layers is included. We're going to use a background layer for the panel and a menu button layer to be placed on top. This diagram also highlights the texture, graphic assets.atlas, and the font, Coutras Regular, that we're going to use for text in this menu. Moving to the level 1 collection, this collection consists of a background game object, a level 1 script that controls game activities for this world, as well as a wizard game object and a GUI. Expanding the level 1 controls GUI highlights that we have 3 control nodes, an exit control that will return us back to the main menu, as well as a left control and a right control, and we use that for controlling the movement of the wizard game object. The level 2 collection is similar to what we designed for level 1. It includes a background game object, in this case a monkey game object, both a sprite and a script. And in that simple single node GUI, there's an exit control node enabling the user to return back to the main menu. Okay, this is going to be the node designations for the graphic user interface. We're going to take each of those nodes and identify by name how they're referred to in the project, and then point to an actual screenshot so you see how the screenshots reflect back in the GUI nodes. The main menu GUI consists of 3 nodes. It's got the menu panel, a select level 1 node, and a select level 2 node, each of those nodes being buttons. The level 1 controls GUI also has 3 nodes. It's got an exit control node, a left control, and a right control. That moves the wizard back and forth. The level 2 controls GUI is pretty simple. It consists of a single node. That's the exit control node. That's the button you would click to get back to the main menu. Okay, I said earlier we're going to do a couple syntax deep dives, and we've got 3 key topics I'd like to talk about today before we jump into building the project. The first is the use of a proxy for loading and unloading a collection into your game. So that'll be the first thing we talk about. The second thing we're going to talk about is how do you apply Lua modules, how do you construct the module, and then how do you use a requirement statement to load that into your script, and then how do you refer to it within your script so you can use those common functions. And lastly, a very common technique is the play animation message that you can send to a sprite. It's because you often want to have a sprite and then you want to change its image or change the orientation of the image, and this allows you to do that pretty rapidly. Well, we've already talked about how the collection proxy is the component that you use for sending messages that directs the loading and enabling and such associated with a collection. I think it'll help to walk through how we do that, following what happens when a user clicks the Select Level 1 Cityscape button on the main menu. When the main menu GUI captures that you've clicked that Cityscape node, the GUI script sends a message to the main script telling it to start Level 1. When that's received by the main script, it takes two actions. First, it sends a message to the Level 1 proxy telling it to load. And then second, it disables the main menu. The Level 1 proxy serves as the intermediary and controls the mechanics of loading the contents of the Level 1 collection. When the loading of Level 1 is complete, Level 1 sends a message to the main.script, aka the message sender, telling it that the proxy has completed its load process. And at that point, the main script can enable Level 1 and also update a status parameter inside our game indicating that Game 1, aka Level 1, is in fact running. And when he's done and that level's complete, or the user wants to exit and return to the main menu, the user clicks the Exit Control node. The Level 1 GUI sends a message to main telling it to start the main menu, and receive the main script sends a message back to Level 1 proxy telling it to unload Level 1, aka removing it from memory. I know, it seems a bit confusing the first time you walk through this, but I'd recommend watching this sequence a couple times just to become familiar with how it works. At this point, I'm sure there's many times when you have a function that provides a unique service that you want to have available across several scripts, or GUI scripts, within your project, but you really don't want to have to insert it separately into each of those scripts. The Lua module, which is a special script file that uses the file extension .lua, is the means for doing that. The Lua module is actually a Lua table, which is declared locally within the module. Let's walk through a simple example. I think that will really illustrate how we would accomplish this using a Lua module, and in this case, I'm going to name the table as M to keep it short. As you can see, each function is declared as an element within the table M. So with that, we've created a table of functions. Now how do we use them? First, within any script file where you want to invoke these functions, you need to load our table as a local variable. And we use that using the require function. In this example, we'll load it into the local variable animmod, which stands for animation mods, using the require function, and that loads the contents of our Lua module. Then we can call each of these functions using animmod.function name, in this case, animmod.animateWindow1. Note that you can pass parameters to that function as required within its declaration. Okay, hey, this one's a highlight. In a game, you're always looking for adding a little pizzazz. So you're always looking at how to quickly change images associated with a sprite or changing the animation associated with a sprite. And that's what this play animation feature is really all about. Let's post a message to the sprite component to accomplish that. And in that, there's really just three parameters. There's the URL of the sprite. That's the first parameter. The message that you want to pass is, quote, play_animation. And lastly, the third parameter is a Lua table that contains the ID of the animation that you have provided. I don't know about you, enough background. Let's build this thing. You know, the old adage still does apply. If you can't plan it, you can't build it. So let's talk a little bit about our plan. We have 5 steps in the project. The first is going to be our project setup. You should be pretty familiar with that. The second is we're going to build from the bottom up. We're going to build the building blocks before we wrap them together. So we're in the second phase is we're going to build level 1 collection. And then we'll build the level 2 collection. And then we'll build the main collection, which includes the menu that ties all these things together. And then the final phase will be the final build and just a double check in terms of functionality. Phase 1 is our project setup. We're going to go into game.project. We're going to modify the dimensions to make sure they comply with what we're looking for. We're going to add our images to an images folder. We'll create an atlas so that the images are stored in a template that can be brought into your application. And then lastly, we're going to load a custom font. In this particular example, we'll build a font and load it into the game. Okay, hey, we ready? Let's jump in the trench. So as usual, we're going to start with an empty project using the empty project template. And let's set the title to Tutorial 7. Level and module procedures, or you can name it whatever you prefer, really. Now that we have tutorial 7 up in our game window here, let's go ahead and take a look at our game.project file and just confirm a couple of things. We've given it the title tutorial 7, levels and modules. We've got our main.collection is the bootstrap collection. That's correct. We want to change our display. I'm going to still conform with an iPad set of dimensions. So I'm going to set the width to 1024 and the height to 768. And at that point, the only other thing I want to double check here is let's go into our game input bindings and just make sure, with a recent addition, by the way, we changed this from mouse _ button 1 to plain button 1. So the input factor now for the mouse trigger or touch trigger would be button 1, and the action is associated with that is a touch. Okay, the next thing we want to do is we want to add images to the project. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create a folder associated with that. We're going to put that folder in main. And so let's add a new folder. Let's give that folder the name images. And let's go ahead, drag those images into the new folder. And you'll see that there's three general categories of graphics for this project. First are the background images, whether it be a forest or a city. And then there's 2 flipbook animations. There's an animation for the wizard, both when he's idle as well as when he's walking. And one for the monkey. He's just kind of doing strange animations out there, but he'll be fine. And then lastly, there's some control icons. There's a left arrow and a right arrow. We're going to use that for moving the wizard back and forth. There's the menu panel, obviously, but in terms of controls, there's also the exit button. So that's kind of where we are on that. We should be fine. I've indicated some attribution to several sources for these free resources. I've put that in the remarks column here on YouTube. They've come from clipartkid.com, craftpix.net, gameartguppy.com, and freepick.com, and specific images associated with each of those. I'd really like to thank each of those sites for providing those free graphic assets. That's really great. Thank you. Okay, next we're going to create an atlas to place our images into. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our main again. We're going to pick New. We're going to select Atlas, and we're going to name this Atlas Graphic Assets. Now that we're in the outline, so we want to bring our images over in a couple categories. First, our stationary images, and then we'll add the animation groups. So we'll add images. And then we want to create 3 animation groups. The first animation group we're going to call Monkey. We're going to add several images to that. It'll be the Monkey 1, 2, and 3 images. Now for Monkey Hop, let's set the frames per second to 6. That'll give us a relatively smooth motion, and looping forward works fine for that. Next, let's add an animation group. And the name of this next animation group will be Wizard Walk. We're also going to set this to a frames per second of 4. And let's go ahead and add the images for that. So the wizard walk images are walk 1 through walk 4. And lastly, our last animation group will be the wizard when he's idle. We're going to set the frames per second to 4 for that as well. And let's go ahead and add those images. The wizard idle is 1, again, 1 through 4. Okay, one more thing before we finish up the atlas. We want to create an animation group so that when we press the button, it changes color, it changes the actual image. And we can do that with a flipbook, but we need an animation group to do that. So we're going to create 2 of them, one for when the button is released and the other for when the button's pressed. So first, let's do the first one. Let's go ahead and create an animation group. In the property window, change the ID to released button. And now let's go ahead and add an image to that, and let's use the red button released image. Okay, now let's do the second one. Go ahead and create another animation group. Change the ID to pressed button. And let's go ahead and change the image for that to red button pressed. Lastly, in this, and this is just the setup phase, but our last piece is we're going to put all our scripts into the same general folder just for organization. So we're going to create a folder for that. And I'll call it Scripts Repository. I'm not creating any scripts right now, but this will be where we store those scripts. So our last step in build 1 will be adding a unique font to the project. It adds a little additional character, if you will, to the graphic user interface. I've selected the Coutrim's regular font. What I want to do is find a place in my project for that, so I'm going to produce a new folder. I'll name that folder Fonts. I'm going to go ahead, take in the downloaded file. I'm going to put it in my Fonts folder. Okay, now that I have that OTF file in my fonts folder, we're going to create an actual font file associated with it. So in the fonts folder, go ahead and right click, select new, select font, and then you have to give this font a name. I'm going to use the same name just to just to keep it simple. Coutrim's regular. Now that the font file is in focus, I want to actually set the font file to be the Coutrim's regular that we had downloaded. And I want to make it a little bit bigger, so I'm going to change the size to 20. And we're done. That's the end of build 1. Let's go ahead and save our project. I'm going to go ahead and build it, just to see what it looks like. And as you can see, it's no errors. That's always good. And it basically produces a blank screen. Okay, let's build the level 1 collection. Level 1 collection is going to consist of a couple game objects. We'll have a background game object, which paints a cityscape. We're then going to build a game object associated with a wizard sprite. And then it has a script associated with that. Will control the movement and the orientation of the image on that sprite. We'll build the graphic user interface that's going to include a left and a right control button, as well as an exit control button that allows us to escape out of this level and go back to the main level. So let's go ahead and construct level 1. So within the project window, go ahead, right-click the main folder, select New, and select Collection. In the pop-up window, let's go ahead and name this collection Level 1. You'll notice now it's in focus. So this is kind of important. Since we're building the lower level game level and we want to debug it, we need to change the bootstrap in the game.project file and change that bootstrap to the level1.collection. That way, when we run this particular program right now, it's going to bring up just level 1. It won't start at that top menu because we haven't built the top menu yet. Now let's go ahead and add the background object to the level 1 collection. So with level 1 dot collection in focus, over here in the outline window, let's go ahead and right-click collection, select add game object, change the ID within the properties window to background, and go ahead and change the game object position to center it on the screen. So that would be an X of 512 and a Y of 384. Now we're going to now add the actual component, the sprite. So let's go ahead and right-click this new background game object, select add component, and select sprite. Now we want to change image to the source, and that would be the graphic assets atlas. We created that one earlier, and we're going to set the default animation attribute to city. So this is going to be a city background, and that'll be the PNG file. Now, we actually don't need a control script for the level 1 collection because we're not really building a full game level. But I thought it'd be important to add a stub file. In other words, this is where, as we build this out and we added functionality to the level, this is where it would go. So I've go ahead and created a stub script file. It consists right now only of comments, but this is where you'd add the init function and on messaging and things such as that when you want to expand it into an actual game. So let's go ahead and add a new Lua script file within the Project Explorer. Store it within the script repository. And then let's go ahead and add that. Within the outline panel, let's go ahead and add a hosting game object to the level 1 collection. We'll call it level 1. And let's go ahead and add this script as a component file to that level 1 game object. Okay, next we're going to add the wizard game object to the level 1 collection. So with the level 1 collection in focus, let's add a new game object to the project. Go ahead and right-click collection, select add game object. Hey, in the property windows, go ahead and name this game object wizard. And set the game object's position as a X of 512 and Y of 225. So it's centered on the screen left and right, but it's positioned a little bit towards the bottom. Let's go ahead and add a sprite to this game object. Right-click wizard, select add component, and select sprite. So within the properties window for this new sprite, let's go ahead and change the ID to wizard sprite. And identify the image resource as graphicassets.atlas. And select the default animation to be wizard_idle. Okay, let's add a script file to our wizard game object. We want there to be some gameplay at this level, but we're going to keep it simple for now. So for this project, we'll add the ability for the wizard to be moved left or right by pressing an arrow button on the screen. There's going to be a left arrow and a right arrow. And we're going to change its flipbook animation between idle, aka it's standing still, and walking, depending upon the sprite status. And this is going to be accomplished using the following Lua script file. So let's go ahead and create that script file within our scripts repository. In the repository, select New, select Script, and let's name this Wizard Actions. Let's change the default template to the following. Now there's several areas I'd like to highlight within the script file. First is I've included a local function, play animation. That plays the animation that's provided as one of its input parameters, unless that same animation is already playing in the game. There are two internal script properties, Self.speed, which is initialized to 0 in the init file, aka it's standing still. But that speed is going to be reset based on either a directive received from the GUI or based on a boundary condition. The second script property is self.currentAnimation. That simply keeps track, it's a control variable, keeps track of whether the wizard is idle or whether he's walking as the current animation. There's update logic associated with change in direction. You'll notice that that direction changes when it gets close to the left or the right border of the game world. And in the onMessage function, when this script receives a message from the GUI based on the user clicking an arrow button, it resets the animation and the speed to reflect that. Lastly, let me just quickly highlight the set_hflip function. That flips the sprite image horizontally. So in other words, the wizard can be facing to the left when he's walking left or facing to the right when he's walking right. Now let's add this script as a component file to the wizard game object. Now we're going to add the graphic user interface to our level 1 collection. So the first step is going to be to create the new GUI file within our project explorer. Let's go ahead and right-click Main, select New, select GUI, and let's change the name to Level 1 Controls. Double-clicking the Level 1 controls within the project explorer is going to put it into focus within our outline window. So over in the outline window, we first need to reference the atlas within our GUI textures. So let's provide a reference by doing the following. Right-click Textures, select Add, and select Textures. Go ahead and pick the Graphic Assets Atlas from the pop-up box selection. Next, we're going to add a GUI script to our Level 1 GUI. So within the Project Explorer, let's go ahead and right-click the script repository because we want to place all of our script files there. Select New, select GUI script, and let's go ahead and name that script Level 1. Go ahead, let's replace the default Lua code with the following. There's several areas I want to highlight here within the GUI script. First, you notice that we're requiring a Lua module. We discussed Lua modules within our syntax deep dive, and in this particular module, I've placed our animation functions. Next, you'll notice that we have a cascade type animation of each of our GUI nodes. It basically launches the GUI nodes in sequence with a short delay between each. Several actions are taken within the onInput function. First, when a player presses one of the control buttons, the animate button press function changes the color. Actually, it fades the color of that button. But when the button's released, the fade is reverted back and a message is sent to the wizard action script, directing it to change direction or to transition to idle. There's an exit button, which when released sends a message to the main script within the main.collection, which starts the main menu, and then it disables the level 1 GUI. Let's go ahead and add the exit control node to this GUI. So with the GUI in focus, there in the Outlook window, let's right-click the node folder within the GUI. Select Add, select Box. At this point, we want to change the attributes of this exit GUI node as follows. Let's set the ID to exit control. Let's set the position to X of 974 and Y of 720. And set the texture to exit button. Now let's add the left and the right arrow controls to the GUI. Again, with the GUI in focus in the outline panel, let's do that left control first. Right-click Nodes, select Add, select Box. In the Properties panel, change the ID to left control and set the position of X50 and Y of 0. And set the texture to left arrow. All right, and let's finish up the GUI control nodes with the right control. Go ahead and right-click Nodes, select Add, select Box, Let's change the following properties in the property panel. The ID would be right control. The position would be 974x and a Y of 0. And the texture is right arrow. Okay, lest we forget, we need to add our GUI script file to the GUI. Go ahead with the level 1 GUI in focus. In the outline, go ahead and click the GUI. Down in the properties, set the script to the level 1 script. And now for our last step. We now need to add our newly created GUI to the level 1.collection. So with level 1 collection in focus, within the outline panel, go ahead and right-click collection, select add game object. And in the property panel, change the ID to controls. Go ahead and right-click controls and select add component file and select level 1 controls.gui. Level 1 is now complete. So our next step will be adding a Lua module. In order to highlight how we can manage reusable code within our default game projects, I thought it would be helpful to create a Lua module that contains some of our, what I'd call, quote, standard animation functions, that we can apply to many games. Let's create it as follows. In the project folder, right-click main and select new folder. Let's name that folder modules. Right-clicking modules, select new and choose Lua module. Let's go ahead and name that Lua module as animatecalls.lua. Go ahead and replace the default template with the following. Several areas to highlight in this module. Our level 1 collection uses two functions. Animate button press, which slightly fades the button and then reduces its scale, its size, and animate button release, which returns that scale back to 1. There's a series of cascaded GUI animation functions that animate the placement of buttons for the main menu, as well as windows. And the require statement within the other script files that we've built for this project will appropriately call these functions from this module folder. So at this point, level 1 is now complete. Let's go ahead and conduct a function check. Let's save and run the build. Remember, we set the bootstrap to the level 1 collection, so this build is going to be constrained to level 1 functionality. Well, the background and the wizard game objects are both shown. And the left and the right controls within the GUI appear, but look, they don't seem to be quite at the right location. They're way too low. Let's go back. Let's change that Y position for both the left and the right controls to 50. Let's save, and let's rebuild. Okay, that certainly looks much better. They're now both functional. Please note, the exit control is not going to work at this point since we haven't built the main.collection yet, and that contains the main menu. Okay, let's build the level 2 collection. Again, this is going to have a game object associated with the background, and then a second game object associated with a monkey. A monkey will have a sprite associated with it, as well as a monkey script. And then lastly, we'll have a graphic user interface that includes a single node. That's your escape control node or exit control node that allows you to escape this level and get back to the main menu. Okay, so in the second level, we're going to create a monkey game object that can be moved around by clicking at any new location within the game world. Look familiar? Yeah, this is a derivative of the game object movement example that we described in detail back in tutorial number 4. Let's first create the level 2 collection. We're going to accomplish this by first right-clicking main within the Project Explorer, select New, select Collection, and change the name to level 2.collection. Okay, now let's add a background object to that level 2 collection. So with level 2 in focus, over in the outline window, right-click Collection, select Add Game Object, and rename it Background within the Properties window. Let's set the position to X of 512 and Y of 384, and that'll put that background squarely in the middle of the screen. Now we also want to add a sprite now to that background game object. So go ahead and right-click background, select sprite, and within that sprite, let's set the default image resource to our graphic assets file. And let's select the animation of, in this case, it's going to be a forest. Okay, now we want to add a control script to the level 2 collection. So this is going to be similar to level 1. It's really an empty stub. This is what you can use in the future if you want to expand on this example. And this would be where all your underlying game logic would be. So to do that, within the project window, right-click Scripts Repository, select New, select Script, and let's go ahead and rename it Level 2 Controller. And then replace the default code with the following. Now let's go ahead and add a hosting game object to the collection. Let's call that hosting game object level 2. And then add this script to the component file. Okay, now we're going to add the monkey game object to level 2. So with level 2 collection in focus, over in the outline window, let's go ahead and right-click collection and select add game object. And then in the properties window, let's change the name to monkey. We can leave that position alone since we're going to be setting the initial position within the init function for this particular game object. Go ahead and right-click monkey, select add component and select sprite. And in the properties window, change the ID to monkey sprite. Set the image source to graphics assets.atlas. And go ahead and set the default animation to monkey hop. Now let's go ahead and we're going to add a Lua script to the monkey. So within the Project Explorer, right-click Scripts Repository. Select New and select Script. And go ahead and rename it to be Monkey Actions. Go ahead and double-click the Monkey Actions script to put it in focus. And let's replace that default code with the following. A couple quick highlights. First, in the init, it sets the speed to 0, that's a script variable, and positions the monkey within the game world. And then in the onInput function, when a user releases the touch action, the script starts an animation that moves the monkey from its current location to the location where the touch occurred. Where the touch occurred is the action.screen_x and action.screen_y. Now let's go ahead and add this script as a component file to the monkey game object. Okay, now let's add a graphic user interface to this level 2 collection. So within the Project Explorer, right-click Main, select New, select GUI, and let's change the name to Level 2 Controls. Now with Level 2 Controls in focus over in the Outline window, within the Property panel, let's go ahead and add a texture to this GUI. That will be our Graphic Assets Atlas. Now let's add a GUI script by right-clicking Scripts Repository over in the Project window. Select New, select GUI Script. Let's name this GUI script Level 2 and replace the default Lua code with the following. There's a couple highlights in this GUI script. First, there's a cascade animation of the exit button using the Lua module functions. Within the onInput function, when exit control is pressed, it calls the anim animate button press function from the Lua module, and that fades and changes the size of that node. And also within onInput, when the exit control is released, it again calls the animate button release function that reverts the node back to its original size, and then it posts a message to the main collection indicating to start the main menu. And then it also finally disables this level 2 GUI. Okay, let's go ahead and add this GUI script to the level 2 controls. With the level 2 control GUI in focus, over in the outline, take a look at the property window and go ahead and select this script. Now finally, for this GUI, let's add the exit control node to the GUI. So again, within the Outlook window, let's right-click the node folder, select Add, and select Box. And within the property window, make the following changes. The ID now is exit control. The position is X974 and Y720. And the texture will be exit button. Okay, hey, there's one last step. We need to add our GUI now to the level 2 collection. So let's put level 2 collection in focus. And in the outline window, let's go ahead and add a hosting game object. Add game object. Let's change the ID to controls. And now let's go ahead and select add a component file and pick the level 2 controls GUI as that component file. Okay, I think it's time for a function check here on build number 2. So let's go ahead and in the game.project file, let's reset the bootstrap to the level 2 collection. And again, that will constrain this build in terms of its functionality to level 2. Let's save and build. Well, we'll notice that the background of the monkey game object is shown. And as we click the screen, it moves the monkey to whatever location that we're touching. And similar to our build 1, the exit control still isn't going to work because we haven't built the main collection yet. That's next. Okay, the last real build activity in this phase is going to be to build the main collection. This will be our main menu. It's going to include a menu panel game object that provides a little context for the menu and 2 level selection buttons. It'll include a GUI script associated with those buttons that monitors both the press and the release actions. And most importantly, it's going to include 2 level proxies, a level 1 proxy and a level 2 proxy, as we've discussed earlier in the tutorial, that'll allow the buttons on this GUI to then direct the load action associated with either level 1 or level 2. Alrighty, hey, it's time to pull all these parts together, and we're going to do that within our main.collection. So let's put main collection in focus inside the outline window, and let's create a game object that will serve to host all the component files needed to support the main menu here. So let's go ahead and right-click collection, select add game object, and in the property panel, change the ID to main. So I think the first thing that we're going to do is let's add the graphic user interface for this main collection. That's really the guts of what this thing's going to do. So over in the project window, let's go ahead and create that GUI. Right-click main in the project window, select new, select GUI, and change the name to main menu. Now, with main menu in focus, let's go over to the outline window. First, let's set the reference to our atlas by right-clicking Textures, select Add, select Textures, and go ahead and select the Graphic Assets Atlas. That'll be the source for all the imagery here. Now we're going to add a unique font to this. So let's go ahead and right-click Fonts, select Add, select Fonts, and let's go ahead and pick the Kutram's regular font that we created here earlier in the tutorial. Now we want to make sure things layer on top of each other appropriately, so we're going to create 2 distinct layers, one for the background and one for the menu buttons. So let's do the background first. That'll be the bottommost layer. Right-click Layers, select Add, select Layer, and change the name to Background. And now for the upper layer, go ahead and right-click Layers again, select Add and select Layer, and change the name of this layer to Menu. Okay, with that done, we're now ready to add the menu panel. That'll be a backdrop, if you will, a backdrop graphic to the buttons. So right-click Nodes, select Add, and select Box. Change the ID to Menu Panel. Change the position to X of 512 and Y of 384. And go ahead and change the texture to Menu Panel and set the layer to Background. Now that'll serve as that backdrop to our menu. Now let's go ahead and create the first menu selection button. Again, go ahead and right-click the node folder within the GUI. Select Add and select Box. Change the attributes for this to be an ID of select level 1, a position of X of 512 and Y of 425. Pick a texture of released button and set the layer to Menu. Now that's the bottom button, but we want to put some text on it so when you see it, you can read it. So let's go ahead and right-click the select level 1 inside the outline window. Select Add, and then go ahead and select Text. And now we're superimposing text on top of that release button. Within the property window, change the ID to Text1 and change the text to Level 1-Cityscape. And let's set the font to Coutrim's Regular. Now we're going to build the second menu item. It's pretty close to what we just did. Let's go ahead and right-click the node folder within the GUI and select Add and select Box. Change the attributes for this second node to be ID of select level 2. Its X position is 512 and Y is 325. The texture is released button, and it'll be in the menu layer. Go ahead and right-click the select level 2 in the outline window. Pick Add, select Text. Now down in the property window, change the ID to Text2 and change the text to Level 2-Forestscape. And let's go ahead and select a font of Coutrim's Regular. Okay, that sets the nodes up. Now let's write the GUI script that's going to tie those things together. So over in the project file, we're going to put this GUI script in our scripts repository. So let's right-click Scripts Repository, select New, and select GUI script. Let's go ahead and name this GUI script as main_menu and replace the default Lua code with the following. A couple highlights here. The two level select buttons are cascaded onto the screen during the init function. Pressing the select level 1 plays a flipbook that changes the image for the button. And then when you release the select level 1 button, it reverts that button image back to its original and then sends a message to the main script to start level 1. And a very similar process applies for the selection of level 2, both the select, the press, and the release. Okay, two things we can't forget to do. We want to add now our GUI script to the main menu GUI, and then once we've done that, we want to add that GUI to our main game object as a component file. Let's go ahead and do the first now. Let's go ahead and bring the main menu GUI into focus. Now down in, if you click GUI up in the outline window, go down to Properties and set the script to our GUI script. And now let's bring main collection into focus. Let's look at our main game object And let's now add this GUI as a component file to that main game object. Okay, now the GUI is done. So we have one last thing we want to add. We still have to get our collection proxies in here. So let's go ahead and add our 2 collection proxies to this main collection. Let's add the first one. Go ahead and right-click main within the outline window. This is within our main collection. And select add component and select collection proxy. Within the property window, change the ID to level1 underscore proxy and set the collection to level1 dot collection. Now we have a proxy where main can use this proxy to send message traffic back and forth to the level 1 collection. Similarly, let's go ahead and add the level 2 proxy. Right-click main in the outline window, select add component, select collection proxy, and then within the property window, change the ID in the property window to level 2 underscore proxy and set the collection for that proxy to the level 2 dot collection. Almost done. Almost done. One more thing. So in main now, we have to have a main script that will be the overall control of that interplay between our menu and the individual level 1 and level 2 collections. So let's add a new script within our Project Explorer by right-clicking the script repository and select New and select Script. Go ahead and replace the default code with the following. A couple highlights. We set a script property within init for the game state, and that'll keep track of which particular piece of the game we're in, whether we're in the menu, we're in level 1, or we're in level 2. Within onMessage, there's going to be 4 message directives that are being processed. First is start main menu. That'll ensure that the level 1 or the level 2 collections are unloaded. Then it will enable the main menu. Start level 1, that loads level 1 via the level 1 proxy, and then disables the main menu. Start level 2, that loads level 2 using the level 2 proxy and disables the main menu. There's the proxy loaded. Upon confirmation that the level 1 or the level 2 collection's been loaded, then it sets the current state to that level and enables the level and initiates it. Okay, now we need to add this main script to our main game object within the main collection. Main, and main. Okay, it's time for our final build. But before we take a look, let's not forget, we have to go back to our game project. We need to change the bootstrap to our main.collection, and that will focus on opening up at that main menu. And then lastly, we'll have our final build. The final build will actually build the entire application, and then we'll make sure that it meets all the functionality criteria that we have and that we haven't made any mistakes. Okay, this is the final build. As you can see, we have our level select background panel with our 2 level selection buttons, both Cityscape and Forestscape. If I click the Cityscape button, it brings me into the Cityscape level. I have my wizard here. He's got an animation. If I click the right button, he moves to the right. If I click the left button, he moves to the left and he changes his orientation. If I come up here and click the exit control button, that brings me back to the selection level. I can do the same thing for level 2. I click level 2. I now have my monkey. Anywhere I click on the screen, he moves. And I can return to the main menu by hitting the exit control. Looks like everything's working well. There you go. Hey, this concludes this introductory series of tutorials associated with the Defold game engine. Hope you found it helpful. As usual, down in the remarks, you'll see a URL. That'll allow you to download a zip file that contains all of the project files associated with this particular tutorial's projects. It also has all the project downloads for each of the other tutorials as well. If you've moved around and maybe selected just those tutorials of interest, you can download these and you can learn from those in terms of how to apply the various techniques. If you should have any comments or recommendations, please send a comment down below. I'd certainly appreciate that. I look forward to your feedback so we can make this a more productive course. If you haven't yet, please subscribe. I would find that also very helpful. Hey, listen, I have to tell you, there's a text version of this on the Tactics Studios website. Some people prefer to read the text version, others the video. You now have a combination of both. Okay, although we've concluded this introductory series, hey, a little foreshadowing. There are going to be some complete game tutorials coming out on separate playlists. I'm working on those now and hope to release them here in the near term. Until then, hey, I hope you have an opportunity to build that amazing game you've been thinking about. Take care now.